Hi everyone. Today let's talk about earnings, starting off with Alphabet, Microsoft, and Snap. Then we'll take a look at the economic calendar, as well as Max Payne. Then we'll take a look at the charts, results for the day, and my thoughts going into tomorrow's session. If you like trading stocks and options and making money, definitely like and subscribe. I make videos like this every single day that the markets are open, as well as Sundays, so make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Welcome to the Portfolio Bulletin. Let's get started. So starting off with Google here, this was the best of the day. Revenues rose 7%, cloud rose 28%. Everything looks good. You can see they're up around 7.5% after hours. Everything looks great. Earnings beat by 10 cents. Revenue beat by almost 2 billion. Google Ads beat. Cloud revenue, talked about it. It's better than expectations. Traffic acquisition, also better than expectations. And that 7% growth is a great number on a year-over-year basis. And you can see that here we had slowing growth. We were concerned in here. It was cheapening in terms of prices. Then we had a nice step up in terms of acceleration of growth. And now Google is looking much, much better here after hours. We'll look at those charts later. But good earnings and good guidance here for Google. Moving over to Microsoft, the cloud revenue continues to slow, not by much, but a little bit. So 27 down to 26% for this quarter. R&D costs also decreased for the first time since 2016. So they're potentially bracing for a little bit of weaker economics. You can see they were down about 1% on this earnings announcement. They continue to say AI, so we'll see if that props up the stock a little bit. Earnings, $2.69, nice little beat. Revenue also beat, but it looks like the guidance here and the slowing cloud is affecting the stock mostly. Revenue is 8% year over year in the quarter, and growth has come in under 10% for 3 consecutive quarters for the first time since 2017. So the company as a whole is slowing down. It's definitely a giant and still definitely making money, but growth is slowing, and that can weigh heavy on forward EPS. In terms of growth by sector, you can see cloud was growing super fast last year, and it continues to cool off. Dynamic Products Plus speeding up a little bit. 365 doing okay. Office Cloud Services doing okay. Products, including cloud services, also doing well, growing. And then you have Windows OEM contracting here, which is definitely not great. It was very weak in the previous 2 quarters and slightly less weak this quarter. And then you have Xbox Plus services also growing quite slowly, but still growing. And lastly here, we have Snap. We won't spend a ton of time on this, but they did plunge 17% on a weak forecast. The company's sales declined 4% from 1.11 billion. They lost 2 cents per share compared with 4 cents. Revenue beat slightly, but their forward guidance was weak. And they say their average revenue per user is at $2.69 versus the $2.68 expected. Again, it's not that they performed terribly this quarter, it's that their forward guidance is continuing to weaken and that they are not growing as expected. Moving over to the economic calendar, we had consumer confidence came in very high. 5-year note came in at 4.17, a little bit higher than the previous read. And then looking at tomorrow, don't forget, we have the FOMC in the afternoon. That's going to be huge. We also have new home sales at 10 o'clock, building permits at 8 o'clock, but super focused on the FOMC for tomorrow. Moving over to earnings, you can see Microsoft, Google beating on the top and bottom lines, Visa also beating, Texas Instruments doing well, New Era Energy, Verizon missing on revenue but beating on earnings, General Electric beating on both top and bottom lines, Sherwin-Williams beat on both, Waste Management missing on both, 3M beat on both, and General Motors also beat on both. So everything looks pretty good here still. Couple of misses on a couple of sections, but not very much so far. Looking at tomorrow, we have Meta, Coca-Cola, Union Pacific, Boeing, Services Now, AT&T, Canadian Pacific, as well as the CME Group. They're the ones that do all the options and market making. General Dynamics, O'Reilly, Chipotle here as well. A couple of interesting ones, definitely being led by Meta tomorrow. Moving over to Max Payne, you can see Max Payne sitting at 448. Current stock price 456, so we're quite a bit higher than that. You still have these 2 put walls and these 2 call walls. 460 seems like the high for the week, right at the top of the puts. So I wouldn't expect too much more than a 1% gain this week if we did get further upside. Put call ratio 2.26. I would expect that to come down a little bit after the FOMC announcements tomorrow. We'll see how that plays out. Options, not too bad here at almost 1.5 million. Moving over to the charts, starting off with the S&Ps here on the hour and the daily. Got another rally, basically marching in that same trend. Momentum and RSI both look good. Still looking for a push up to 457.57. We're also at this previous high going back to 19 July. You can see that here on that doji candle, looking like a double top here. Very critical level going into the FOMC day. You could absolutely see a rally into the announcement, throw some wicks, maybe even hit this trend line up here, and then we get a rejection off of FOMC comments. That would be interesting. But right now, everything is still intact, and you have to trade it that way. Similarly, here on the NASDAQ, we had a rally on the day. Yesterday was consolidation at the 200. We talked about it. It looked like it was going to hold and then get another push. And sure enough, we did get another push here today. We hit the 9 EMA on the daily chart. Momentum still bearish. RSI still looks weak. If this pushes up, I would expect divergence between this high and whatever high we set up here, unless we do get a higher high and RSI gets into that same zone. Certainly possible. You notice how much weaker the NASDAQ is off of this previous high versus where we are now. S&Ps were at a double top. NASDAQ definitely setting up a lower high. If we get rejection on the FOMC tomorrow, anytime before that 387 mark. Overall, still short-term bullish, not expecting a huge push off of the FOMC, and that could even be a potential turnaround point. Moving over to the Russell and the Dow, the Russell did absolutely nothing on the day. Look at that, straight sideways, hitting my alert over and over during the day. We're up a little bit after hours, and we're above 195.15, so I'm still bullish here. If it starts to move lower and we close below that level too much, then I'm going to be exiting those positions. But as of right now, we're still bullish. We were above it for most of the day, sold off at the end of the day, now rallying after hours. Dow showed a little bit of weakness, but not much. Definitely slowing, and momentum is bearish. RSI looking weaker going into tomorrow, which is interesting considering that the Dow has been one of the strongest of the bunch here recently. Moving over to the SPX divided by the M2 money supply here on the daily chart. I continue to talk about this because we're right at these all-time high levels going back to November of 21. Just barely short of it, 21.93. My level here is 22.05. You can see we got a couple of wicks above that level before we had a significant move down. Right now, we're still looking very bullish. Everything is still intact. Definitely getting into overbought conditions. But if we get a rejection off of this 2205 level, that's going to be a very important level in my opinion, and I would expect that to be a zone where we could potentially see a significant change of trend. Moving over to Apple and Tesla here on the 4-hour chart. Apple not doing much of anything, testing that level, rejecting once again. Does look a little bit bullish after hours, which is interesting. It's probably going to hover in the zone until we get earnings and some forward guidance. Might push up a little bit more tomorrow, but momentum basically zero. RSI positive, but not great. Again, no clear direction right now on Apple. Tesla pushed up into that 21, rejected from that level, back down to support, 264.68. Talked about that potentially happening yesterday. Momentum showed that it was going to maybe break through that level, but it didn't do it. Clear rejection, down to support. If that support breaks, then we could have a much deeper low, in my opinion, potentially down to the 200, sitting at 238.86. And then my next support is at 232.84. Moving over to Microsoft and Google here on the 15-minute charts, I just want to show those earnings reactions. Microsoft pushing down all the way to 338 before throwing a big wick and bouncing up to that 200 SMA on the 15-minute chart. Now it seems to be rallying a little bit from that level. Definitely not a great reaction. Google, on the other hand, rallied from 222.74 all the way up to 232.50. So a $10 move there, super big. Pulling back a little bit now, 129.92 is my level, but you can see a clear difference in terms of reaction. Jumping up to the 12-hour charts here, you can see big wick to the lows, hit that 55 EMA on the 12-hour. Definitely setting up a lower high in my opinion. Momentum bearish, RSI rejecting off of the SMA. Looks a little bit weaker here on Microsoft. Looking at Google, you can see we'd been consolidating in the zone. If this breakout above these previous highs hold, 129.92, then you can trade off of this zone looking for 133.86 or 138.21. Earnings could push this much higher, especially with good guidance. Moving over to staples and discretionary. Staples through a wick to the upside, through a wick to the downside, basically unchanged on the day. Similarly here with discretionary, hit that 55 EMA on the 4-hour chart, rejecting here down a little bit after hours. So trading off the 55, sitting at 172.53. We're below all of the EMAs and SMAs, and it does look quite weak going into tomorrow's session. Moving over to transports on the hourly and the weekly, you can see hourly pulling back below all of the shorter term EMAs and SMAs, about to get across of the 21 and 55 EMAs, bearish momentum, bearish RSI, definitely pulling back a little bit more substantially here. We got some earnings coming up with the railways, so that could certainly affect this price action. Looking at the weekly chart, you can see that is an inside candle right now, momentum weakening, huge volume yesterday, could have been exiting near the top of that candle and the top of this channel. If this holds in this area and closes like this, I would expect the next week to be quite bearish. Moving over to breadth here on the 50 and 200 day average. We actually got a bearish day on breadth for both of these. Still a bullish trend, still above the 9 EMA on both charts, but it seems to be pulling back a little bit here today. Still stuck at that 92.25 level on the 50-day average. I don't expect to get above there. We're very close to the key resistance here. 200-day average, close to resistance, not a key resistance, but definitely looks a little bit weaker here today than it did yesterday. Moving over to yields, you can see the 2-year and the 10-year rallying a little bit, setting up for that 25 basis points that we're going to get tomorrow. As the 10-year continues to rally here a little bit, I would expect equities to go lower a little bit as well. We'll definitely keep an eye on this one, but it's still within that same range that it's been in over the last few weeks. Moving over to the dollar here on the daily chart, you can see we did end up rallying up to that 21 EMA. I do think that 21 is probably going to hold at least in the short term. Might see a pullback down to the 9. You could see that EMA hold and then see a continuation rally. That would be a higher low setup, certainly possible. If we reject from this level and break that 9 EMA on the daily chart, then I would expect a lower low down to this 98 area. Moving over to the volatility indices, MOVE index went higher. VIX ended up going a little bit lower on the day, but we're still holding this structure, continuing to set up slightly higher lows and higher highs. We'll see how this plays out going into FOMC tomorrow. Maybe we get a big spike on the announcement or some comments during the statement and Q&A. We'll see how that goes tomorrow, but definitely interesting little setup here on the VIX. Moving over to my accounts, you can see I made a few dollars. You like to see it. The Russell was basically unchanged. I still have that 195 call for tomorrow on both of those 100 shares. Would expect to make that money going into tomorrow's session. We'll see how that plays out. Otherwise, looking at the Qs here, I ended up buying 100 more shares to cover this second call that I had. So this 178 call is going to get executed. That'll be good. Make a little bit of money there on one of those sets of shares. I still have 100 shares going out to 378 for tomorrow. Have a $3.70 credit on that. And that's really the only position on the Qs that I have going into tomorrow's session. Overall, I think the FOMC might have some more comments about potentially more hikes or at least one more hike going into the rest of the year. We'll see how that plays out. And I do think we'll probably get at least somewhat of a bearish result. Overall, neutral to bearish going into the FOMC. Let me know down in the comment section what you thought of earnings. Seemed a little bit mixed. What do you think we're going to get for Amazon and Meta as we go forward in the week? Definitely like and subscribe if you got any value out of this video, and make sure you hit the bell so you don't miss out on any future episodes. Of course, none of this is financial advice. This is all for entertainment purposes. Good luck in your trading and have a great day.